So welcome back to episode 11 of the AHP Preceptorship podcast. We are really excited to invite a previous preceptee to the podcast. So it would be really great, Katie, if you can obviously introduce yourself, your profession, and a little bit about you. So where and when did you qualify?
So I'm Katie. I'm an occupational therapist by background, but I am actually now working in a slightly different role as a clinical specialist in brain injury, although I still get to be a little OT a couple of days a week, which is wonderful. I graduated from Oxford Brookes University, and it was in the dreaded, dare I say, 2020 era that I graduated. So right in COVID, yeah.
Yeah, you were one of our OGs on the
I know,
programme.
an original.
Just because you've seen how the programme will have evolved and we get to hear about it today.
Yeah, so for those listening, Katie was when we first launched our programme, Pan London, back in 2020 when the pandemic hit. We're going to be chatting about kind of the long-lasting legacy of preceptorship, hopefully, if there is any. So we always love to ask and hear about what led you on the path of becoming an AHP and obviously specifically an OT.
So I have always come from an NHS family. I have a dad who's an orthotist and an uncle who's a podiatrist. Repping podiatry there for you. There you go. So always wanted to be in healthcare. Originally actually wanted to be a speech and language therapist, but went and shadowed, and they're wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I went and did some shadowing with the SLTs and with OTs, and seeing the occupational therapists work, and they were in a neuro rehab setting, just inspired me. And so that's how I ended up going ahead with doing occupational therapy.
I think that really shows you how valuable it is to have that shadowing experience.
Absolutely.
But a little AHP family carrying on the AHP legacy.
I love that. I did not know.
That's why we always like to hear about what led people down the path of AHP, because there's so many job roles within the umbrella. And then you get to hear, about the family history of it as well. Amazing. So obviously you said that you graduated in that dreaded year. How, tell us a little bit about your first post and how you were feeling about, going from qualified to new starter. I know that obviously the world was looking a little bit different. Did that impact on your emotions for that?
Yeah, I think it added a lot of challenges. I was lucky enough that my first Band 5 role was actually in a team that I did a second year placement in. So it was quite lovely, because at least it was a bit more familiar. And I imagine for other people who joined their new jobs in that year who had no idea, it must have been even more frightening than what I went through. But it was a weird time, because we're obviously seeing patients in all the PPE and with all the protection. And although I was lucky enough that I was face to face and I still got to see people, as some people didn't, it was a very weird environment. And I think it really tested your resilience and your communication skills, because actually we weren't able to interact maybe how we would have a few years before with patients.
Absolutely. Because obviously you had studied pre-COVID, and then when you started in your post, you're probably like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And then boom, like a completely different way of working. And like you said, even just adjusting to the PPE element.
Keen as well, because so back then you could actually join. It was the COVID register, I think it was called, by HCPC. So I was really keen to join, and as a lot of people I went to uni with were. So I think we were all so keen, because we'd had such good placement experiences, really keen to hit the ground running. And it was a very different environment maybe than what we were anticipating. And actually it was quite stressful. I mean, even for us, although we were face-to-face seeing people, we couldn't all be in the office together. So kind of the general support maybe I had when I was on placement wasn't there. So it was, very different environment. And everyone was still very supportive, but it was a very different way of support.
Of course. We were reflecting literally yesterday, weren't we, Hannah, about COVID and like what a time that was. And like such a strange period for us all, and especially we always reflect about those that were newly qualified, like how tough that must have been, and not getting, like you've just said there, not getting that informal support of just like going in the office and just being like, oh, I've just seen this patient, what do you think? Like it always had to be like a formal phone somebody or arrange a Teams call. And when you first start, you feel like a little bit like a burden, don't you, in a way? Even though you're not, we always say that preceptees, but you do always think, oh gosh, like should I phone? Like is this something appropriate to phone? But when you're face to face, it feels a little bit easier just to catch someone. So luckily, you were welcomed onto the preceptorship program because we had adapted it to be a virtual delivery, which meant that we could include all of our Pan London preceptees. Obviously, you're based in Milton Keynes as well, so it was great to welcome you onto that wider community. Tell us a little bit about your preceptorship experience, obviously including the accreditation element, because you got your 20 credits towards a master's as well. And what did you value most from it?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it was the peer support. Obviously, as you said, being in Milton Keynes, we're not in the wider CNWL network of people. And even then, as far as I'm aware, there wasn't a lot of Band 5s, any AHPs in Milton Keynes at the time. So it was lovely just to be able to come onto the meetings and be able to chat to other people feeling exactly the same as I was, no matter where they were. So I think that, peer support for me was probably one of the biggest things that was really helpful. The accreditation was great as well because it gave me the opportunity to hone in on skills that I needed to progress. I'm quite a driven individual. I was looking, already as to kind of where I was going to go next. And I think it was great to have the opportunity to really look at my reflective practice, look at my core skills. What did I want to focus on so that I could continue to progress while having the lovely peer support from all the other Band 5s?
Yeah, and I think you got the feedback from the LSBU lecturer that it was one of the most amazing portfolios that she'd ever seen. Like, I think she was like absolutely blown away. I remember that feedback. So well done to you, doing that during a really tricky period as well. But also it probably really helped aid that tricky period because you were going back and really looking at your practice and, like you said, looking at those critical reflections, and that would have made you feel a lot more confident maybe when confidence could be slipping here and there because of COVID. So good to hear about that.
And now that you're obviously about 3 years since finishing your preceptorship journey, I know you briefly kind of said it in your introduction, but what are you doing now? Update us. What's the journey been like post preceptorship completion?
I've been a bit all over the place, I think. So I've had the opportunity to move around a bit. So I started obviously as a Band 5 in a community adult rehab team. I then moved into a Band 6 role, still in that team. And then about a year ago, I had the opportunity to move into inpatient physical rehab as a Band 6, which was really good. It was great to kind of see the inpatient because I've been so community based. And then very recently, only in February, I had the opportunity to shift into this clinical specialist role, which isn't an occupational therapy role. It is more generic in that we have physios, nurses and OTs that do these roles. But I think OT skills are very key in this role, and being able to signpost patients along their brain injury journey and being there as a support. And it's helped from me working in all these different settings. I've built quite a good knowledge now of Milton Keynes and the services. So it's been quite nice that I still get to do my OT bits, but I'm kind of waving the flag for OTs in a different kind of role.
Congratulations, and well done for advocating and obviously flying the flag for all of the skills that AHPs have, especially OTs, and especially in those more generic roles to really show the skills that you have that can really help advocate for patients. It's a really exciting role, and nice that you still get your full. We were saying about your Falls team input as well, so nice to have that kind of mix and really building on those skills for the future. And I'm sure it will just carry on. Your journey will just carry on going up, and we look forward to obviously hearing more about it because you will stay in touch.
You can't get away from us, Katie.
No,
never.
And it's I hope that obviously where you're in more of a generic role, that maybe preceptorship really helps establish your professional identity in a way, because that's really important to establish so early on in your career. And now you're in more of a generic role. It sounds like you feel really comfortable with that and what you can bring as an OT, because you've got that professional identity and there's going to be tons of transferable skills. So yeah, it's really great to hear your journey, just like Hannah said, and onwards and upwards for sure. It's just the beginning still. Just
Very
the
true.
beginning. So yes, I guess reflecting on preceptorship, do you feel that you did embed some really good practice from engaging with preceptorship? Are you still embedding any elements of preceptorship? Because we really want to hear about if there's been that long-lasting impact now that you're further on down the line.
Absolutely, of course there was. So I think we did sessions around staff wellbeing and resilience, which is brilliant anyway for any band 5. I think even more so in COVID. It was really helpful sessions. And I say had the opportunity. I went through a very difficult patient-related situation last year, kind of into early this year, which really did push and test my resilience. And I think had we not had that kind of group support and that training about kind of resilience and staff wellbeing, would I've got through it maybe as well as I did? Potentially not. So I think actually that was so key of building those skills, so that when you do face tricky situations, which we all will, particularly as you continue in the role, you just feel like you've got a good grounding to look after yourself, which is so key when we're looking after other people.
Absolutely. We can really have a knock in confidence when tricky situations with patients happen. We've all been through it. And you will continue to have moments like that as well. And it's great that you still reflect on that from those sessions, and it's had such an impact. Because as you said, our resilience will absolutely be tested. And obviously the meetings there still had a great impact. What about kind of that portfolio side of things and the structuring of your CPD? Because we always say that obviously our portfolio is linked to the HCPC CPD process, and our hope is that once you finish preceptorship that you kind of embed that and carry that on. Do you feel that that's something that you've also continued to do?
Yeah, I think we are probably all guilty as we move up the bandings of letting it go by the wayside a little bit. But I have a very good understanding of CPD and how to do it. And I've got ways of kind of organising things. And I think it was helpful to get a good grounding and understanding of the different sections of HCPC, so that when you potentially could come up to audit, thankfully I haven't had to yet, but when you come up, I feel a lot more confident than I probably would have had I not been on preceptorship. So I think it built a really good grounding, and it did get me into good habits. Yes, they slip a little bit, but there's the good organisation, and I already have a good understanding of it.
Yeah, nice, because sometimes the language around about, all of the different standards we have can get really confusing. So as you say, sometimes it may slip down the kind of priority list and, kind of get parked for a little bit as our workload changes and evolves. But, if ever you did find you had that time in your diary, which I know time is precious, but if ever you found it, you never know. And because you've got those skills, you might just be able to think, oh, yeah, I can quickly add this, and this to my CPD. And it's really nice to hear that you can see those transferable skills, which you may have definitely already had, but you've built on them with that organisation of the portfolio and the structure. So
I think that was quite helpful, is that within those sessions, we did get a good grounding of the HCPC standards and how to address them. And actually, I've got to the point now that with the confidence built as well in preceptorship, I lead a Band 5 OT meeting, so for the whole of CNWL, which is lovely. But we're actually going to be covering CPD in, I think, about a week's time. So it's quite nice to be at the point that I feel I have a good enough grounding that I can then help new Band 5s coming in with that development. And again, had I probably not done preceptorship, probably wouldn't have had the confidence to even attempt these kind of things. So it really helped for that, so that we can help the next generation of Band 5s coming in.
And that also reminds me that when you were on our programme, we were getting preceptees to do day in a life vlogs. And again, that was something outside of your comfort zone. But you were like really enthusiastic, wanted to get involved and showcase your role as an OT for, I think it was AHP's day. And from that video, that got recognition within your trust, didn't it? And you were AHP New Starter of the Year, I believe.
It was promising newcomer of the year.
I love that.
And that was it's so great to kind of get recognition of those, and I'm sure that went a really long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those endorsements really are cool, which is another reason why we love having that endorsement section in the portfolio. So those are things that they stick with you, and really can help boost the confidence as well.
Just shows how important that stepping outside your comfort zone as well. And we do have elements, within our portfolio, or we provide opportunities where we're like, why don't you give this a go, or why don't you look at this? And sometimes it will surprise you, won't you? Like, oh, actually, I did really enjoy that. And like you've just said, it's gone on to give you confidence to now facilitate and lead on a wider meeting.
I think that's what I was reflecting on when I knew we were obviously going to get together today. I was reflecting on kind of all the things that have come out of preceptorship, and actually there is a lot. I think preceptorship for me was kind of the first thing I engaged in, and then as you said, I had that wonderful award. I managed to get a profile written about me. I obviously came along with yourselves when we were presenting to West Midlands, I think, about preceptorship. So there's been a lot that came from that, and I think had I not engaged in preceptorship, I wouldn't have had the confidence to do those things that have actually then helped my development and others' development.
Lovely. And now you're obviously supporting Band 5 group, which is great. So I'm sure you may discuss my next question in that group. But what are your top tips to people starting in their first post? Obviously, after you've you've been really reflective about how preceptorship has really benefited you. But what do you think your top tips would be to somebody who's maybe just about to start, is looking for their their first post, or has literally just started?
So when I was thinking about this, I've come up with 3 that I think are quite key. So nice. I've got, you're not expected to know everything, which is what I think everybody is told when they come into a Band 5 role, but it is true. You really are not expected to know everything. To seek all the learning opportunities you can. Obviously, preceptorship was a great way of seeking them, but I think you have the time as a Band 5, which you get less and less, I'm afraid, as you go up the band. So definitely use it. And don't be afraid to be part of initiating change. I think, the degree is changing for all professions, I imagine, and we're coming up with new ideas, and we're from different generations. And I think never be afraid to come in and find your feet first, but then don't be afraid to make change.
Oh, I love them.
Yes. All spot on. And that last one, I guess, really resonates with what myself and Hannah always talk about in meetings, especially looking at quality improvement. You guys are a fresh pair of eyes. Please look at new ways of working. If you've seen something done well in another trust and placements, why don't you suggest it?
We all have different life experience outside of these roles. So not only are we the fresh set of eyes, but you bring in so much life experience. And as you said, Katie, we're all different generations and we all have different strengths as well. And you never know, what you think may be a little idea may grow and be a really good solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was talking to a new preceptee the other week, and her previous role was actually like a project manager. And I was like, that's going to be tons of transferable skills there. And like, you could definitely look at new processes and new ways of working and implementing that within your team. So we're really hot on like empowering preceptees as well to have that voice. Because sometimes you just think, oh, I'm just a Band 5. Like, I'm not going to be able to make change. But you are our future leaders. So you can absolutely start that process now, no matter what banding you are.
Absolutely agree.
So just to kind of round up, would you recommend preceptorship for newly qualified? But it's not just for newly qualified now. National team have recognised that it's for any career transition, and we've really seen that with our international recruits. We've seen kind of return to practice as well, especially as you're further along in your career. And obviously we have heard lots of bits and bobs about how that's really impacted you. But yeah, would you recommend AHPs to engage with preceptorship?
Of course I would. Yeah, no, I absolutely would. I think it opened up so many doors for me in kind of all different opportunities, and it helped progress my confidence, it helped progress my knowledge and my skills, and obviously with the accreditation element, it even further kind of helped with key OT skills for me. But if for nothing else, it builds that peer network and that peer support. And I think that was lovely. I watched so many other AHPs go on to progress their Band 6 roles or progress to wherever they wanted. And it was really lovely to kind of grow as a little group together. And I think that's really key, no matter what stage you're at, of having that peer support, particularly when you can be in teams that are isolated. And then you get that good grounding of kind of getting you forwards in terms of knowing your HCPC skills. And yeah, it just builds that kind of support and makes you feel more confident in your knowledge and your skills.
I think that's a really good point to make about being isolated. I think me and Hannah can definitely relate to that, work in the community similar to yourself. And also being a podiatrist, we're a really small profession. So something like this community of practice where you're linking with others that are going through exactly the same thing. You might have been the only Band 5 in your team. Were you the only Band 5?
Yes.
Yes. So that feels isolating in itself.
And also just to add there, you may even be in a big team but feel isolated. And we've definitely had experiences of that where people, in their, for example, in like an outpatient setting where you're behind a curtain all day, and even though you're part of a big team and on the, looking at, what the team dynamic would be, you'd think, oh, they're getting loads of support. But sometimes because we're just so busy, that curtain's shut all day, and you can feel so isolated even within a big team that you may look forward to networking with others outside of your team as well.
Yeah, it felt like a safe space, as funny as that kind of phrase is, but it was that protected time to come together, to reflect openly, when things hadn't gone too well, or we were feeling really isolated, or, whatever you wanted to discuss, you had that opportunity and that safe space to do that. And I think that is so valuable, because I know you get supervision usually, within your teams, but I think having that peer supervision and feeling kind of safe in this group to discuss things that are going on, particularly in the COVID time, was really, really helpful in development.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds like a great way to kind of round up. Would there be anything else you wanted to add, Katie? Because obviously this is your podcast episode, so
I think I would just encourage people to do preceptorship. I know sometimes it feels like you join your band 5 role and you're so keen to get up and running, and there can be pressure from other people to be doing clinical and focusing on that, but actually use that time, have that protected time, come away and do these wonderful things like preceptorship, because it does make a real difference in your development, but also getting that support.
Yes, and I think that was also mentioned in our previous podcast episode, which I'm saying quite a lot now, because I thought it was a really good quote, that there's always going to be patients to see, there's always going to be waiting lists, but when are you ever going to be newly qualified or in your first 1 to 2 years of practice again? You're not. Exactly. So they were reflecting on how that's ultimately made them a better clinician for the future. So I thought that's a really good quote, and something I'm sharing quite regularly now. So yeah, and thank you for sharing that message of engaging with preceptorship. And I know that you've also helped link us with Milton Keynes Council as well. So getting, again, those really small groups of OTs and AHPs to engage with the programme. We really appreciate that. All right, so we'll round up there.
Lovely. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure you'll hear from us again. We always come out of the woodwork.
Yep.
And I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast and listening to Katie's experience.
And remember, you can get in touch with us if you want to know more about preceptorship. And thank you, Katie.
Bye.